Cat Who Wanted to Go Home, written by Jill Tomlinson. Susie was a little striped cat. She lived in France with a fisherman who had 4 sons. Pierre was 10, Henri was 8, Paul was 6, and Gabby was 4. When they stood in a row, they looked like a set of steps. Gabby didn't know the proper way to stroke a cat. Most cats like being stroked from head to tail, the way the fur lies. But Gabby always stroked Susie backwards from tail to head, but she loved it. One day, Susie found a huge basket in a field. She climbed in, settled in the shade under a stool, and was soon fast asleep. When she woke up, the basket was in the sky. There was a man with her. "Hello, little cat," he said. "You will have to come with me to England." Susie didn't want to go. She wanted to stay in France with the boys. "Chez moi," she wailed. She wanted to go home. So Susie floated across the sea by balloon and landed in England with a bump. She jumped out of the basket and ran to the sea front. How was she going to get home across all that water? A lady took her to an old lady she knew called Auntie Jo. "Do you think you could look after this cat?" she said. "She must be lost." "Of course," said Auntie Jo. "She'll be company for Biff." Biff was Auntie Jo's new budgie, who was just learning to talk. Auntie Jo put down her saucer of milk, so Susie said "thank you" in French. "Merci." "What a funny meow," said Auntie Jo. "Merci," said Biff. "Oh, clever Biff," Auntie Jo said. She stroked Susie. Susie purred, but it wasn't like home. She did miss Gabby stroking her the wrong way. The next morning, Susie went to the beach. There was a man with a board going out to sea, towards France. But what was this? He was coming back. Susie ran to meet him. "Do you want to come surfing with me?" he asked. "Chez moi," Susie said. They went out to sea and back several times before Susie realised they were only doing it for fun. She had a lovely time, even if she didn't get home to France that day. The next morning, Susie ran down to the sea. She saw a speedboat pulling a girl behind it. There was another girl getting ready to go. Susie jumped on her shoulder. The girl was not pleased. "Get off," she cried. But it was too late. Susie got one paw tangled up in the girl's hair and hung on. Then their boat began to swerve. "Chez moi," Susie wailed, making a girl lose her balance. A second later, she and Susie were in the water. Susie headed for the pier, doing a catty sort of dog paddle. The crew in the boat came back to pick up the water skier. "What happened to you?" asked the driver. "It was that wretched cat," she said. "It was all its fault." "What cat?" said the man. "I can't see any cat." "She's swimming, look. She's nearly at the pier already." Susie climbed onto the pier. She dodged all the people and ran home. Auntie Jo rubbed her all over with a towel and gave her dinner. "Merci," Susie said, cleaning her whiskers. "You do have a funny meow," Auntie Jo said, "but you're a funny cat altogether." She stroked her, and Susie purred, but she did miss Gabby stroking her the wrong way. The next morning, Susie ran down to the water's edge. There was a small boat, and beside it was a great big man. He was a channel swimmer. His wife was smearing him with a greasy stuff to keep him warm during his long swim. Susie wasn't very interested until she heard somebody say, "Well, good luck, Jim. Let's hope you get to France." It was hardly surprising that the man found a little cat swimming beside him. Susie held her head up with her ears folded down to keep out the water, but she began to get very tired. Then she felt herself being scooped out of the water and wrapped in a warm towel. She settled happily. Then the wind started to get up, and the sea got rougher and rougher. The man found it more and more difficult to move forward. Susie couldn't believe it when she saw him being helped into a boat, and they turned round and headed back for England. "Chez moi?" she cried, heartbroken. "Chez moi?" The next morning, when Auntie Jo got out of her tricycle, Susie settled in the basket. Nothing Auntie Jo said or did would move her, so she cycled to the church at the top of the hill with Susie in the basket. Susie could see ships. She ran down the cliff path to the big quay. A smart motorboat was about to leave, so she jumped aboard behind a pile of rope. The boat took an admiral to an odd sausage-shaped ship. The sailors aboard were lined up, ready for inspection. The admiral strutted between them, and Susie trotted importantly behind him. The men were trying hard not to grin. It was not often that they were inspected by a tabby cat. The admiral went back to his motorboat to be taken ashore. The sailors rushed about, slamming doors and hatches. Suddenly, Susie was the only one left. But what was happening? The ship was sinking. Susie scrambled to the top of the tower thing, but that was sinking too. Inside the submarine, the captain took a last look through his periscope. "Funny," he said. "I can't see a thing. There seems to be something blocking it." "Good heavens," said the first officer. "The admiral's moggy. We'll have to surface." A sailor took Susie back to the quay, and she ran back to Auntie Jo's house. Auntie Jo put some food down for Susie. Susie purred, but she did miss Gabby stroking her the wrong way. The next morning, Susie said goodbye to Biff because she was sure she would get home to France that day. "Au revoir," she said, which is French for goodbye. "Au revoir," Biff said. "Clever Biff, au revoir." Susie and Auntie Jo pedalled down to the sea front. "I suppose we will see you at supper," Auntie Jo said, as she went into the baker's shop, and Susie spotted a French sailor. She followed him to a big port. Then he turned into a large building and disappeared. Oh well, she didn't need him. One of the ships must be going to France. A car drew up near Susie. "Is this the ferry to France?" the driver said to the man in the uniform. "That's right, sir. Just keep straight ahead," said the man. The car joined a queue waiting to board the ferry. Susie ran along the queue, looking for a car she could get inside without being noticed. She found the very one. The boot was tied half open with rope, leaving room for her to curl up. Suddenly, there was a great clanking noise as they went down the ramp into the hold of the ship. There was a lot of banging and clanging as people got out, slammed their car doors, and disappeared through a little door in the side. At last it was quiet. Susie squeezed between the cars and made for the door, but there was a new noise. It was the ship's engines. They were off. Susie hurried up some steep stairs and came out in the corridor. She went up some more stairs and came out on deck into the sunlight. She ran to the front of the ship and sat there on a curled up rope, looking towards France. She was going home at last. A little girl came and sat with Susie. "Look, look, there's France," she shouted. "France!" Susie could hardly believe it, just as the sailor saw her. "What's that cat doing here?" "There," he asked. "She's a stowaway." He reached forward, but Susie dodged him. He chased her all around the ship and back up on deck again. Soon all the children began to join in. They thought it was a wonderful game. Poor Susie, nothing must stop her now. Then Susie saw the mast. She ran up it and clung at the very top. She stared around her. France was getting nearer and nearer, France and home. Then she saw something else. In the sea ahead was a French fishing boat, and on the deck were 4 little boys, like steps. It was Susie's family. Susie leapt over the sailor's head and ran to the rail and dived. She seemed to go a long way down to the green water, and she came up to the surface like a cork. The children on the ferry pointed down to Susie. "Cat overboard!" they shouted. The French boys saw the children were pointing to something in the sea. In a few seconds Susie was scooped up with a bucket. The children on the ferry cheered. Susie sat in the bucket, purring like the ship's engine. "It's Susie," said Gabby. "I knew she would come back." That evening in England, Auntie Jo was getting worried. "No Susie. I wonder where she is," she said. "Hello," said Biff. "Au revoir." "What did you say?" Auntie Jo said. "Clever, Biff. Au revoir. Now where did you learn that?" said Auntie Jo. "Of course. She did have a funny meow. I wonder." And the French cat that Auntie Jo was wondering about. She was purring and purring as though she would never stop. Gabby was stroking her the wrong way.